I have something here that I want to show you. This is a secret CIA memo from 1998. It got declassified, that's what these markings mean, and it describes a set of high-level CIA meetings on North Korea, which was at that moment the biggest crisis facing American foreign policy. The country's founding leader, Kim Il-sung, had died, leaving power to his bizarre reclusive son, Kim Jong-il. So the CIA convened this big inquiry into the North Korea problem, and what they concluded was that North Korea was doomed. Although the timing is uncertain, the prospect seems strong that the Kim regime's refusal to reverse course will generate some catalyst that will lead to its collapse. Well, they warn about political implosion stemming from irreversible economic degradation, about its leadership being delusionary, about its total reliance on China, even though China appears to prefer a weak North Korea. But this report concluded there was something even bigger that was going to bring down North Korea. The regime's underlying underpinning would be eliminated if it abandoned its commitment to reunification, leading to the loss of ideological legitimacy and total collapse. This all makes more sense if we look at it on a map. For many hundreds of years, Korea was one unified country. And some people date this to about 900 AD, some to 1392 or 1433, and it doesn't matter. The point is, forever and ever, Korea was one nation, one language, one history, all that, until Japan conquered it in 1910. And then World War II ended with the Soviets occupying the northern half and the Americans occupying the south. Everybody still agreed Korea was still one country, but the Cold War powers each set up their own proxy government they wanted to take over. Each got their own name. Not as separate countries, but as separate governments that each claimed to represent the one nation of Korea. But the Cold War powers deadlocked over whose government would take over. So the northern government tried to take the south by force by launching a war. But the war ended more or less where it had started, which pretty much solidified them as the two states that we know today. But both governments have always said, and still say, that there's just one country here, called Korea, temporarily divided by politics and by these two governments who just have to figure out who should rule. They really believe this. Unification is in both of their constitutions. Each has government agencies dedicated to it. They fought a whole war over it, and they've had all sorts of summits ever since on how to bring it about peacefully. North Korea knew that this national mission was the only way to justify their country continuing to exist. But as time went on, it was that very mission that became the biggest thing, dooming North Korea to collapse. For decades, South Korea has been getting more and more democratic, more and more culturally and economically prosperous, while North Korea has gotten poorer and poorer and more authoritarian. And this is the main reason that the CIA thought North Korea was doomed to collapse. The better life got in the South, the more obvious it became that any unified Korean nation would be absorbed by the Southern government. So in other words, North Korea had no claim for why it should continue to exist. Its own official state ideology, which had always emphasized above everything else this goal of reunification, now kind of read as a case for dismantling the North Korean state, which is why predictions of North Korea's collapse were everywhere. And the question I want to ask is, if North Korea was doomed, why did it survive? Because I think the story here is not that everybody was wrong. They were right. North Korea was doomed, and I think they knew it. The story is that North Korea defeated the things that were supposed to have doomed it. They did the impossible, and this happened very, very recently. They even kind of just declared an official victory, and today we are going to talk about how they did it. Before we get into how North Korea did it, I want to show you the very North Korean way that just a few weeks ago they declared their big victory, because it tells us a lot about what the leadership saw as the real threat facing their country's future. In the years leading up to this moment, their collapse was looking more and more inevitable. In 2006, The Atlantic ran a whole cover story about what would happen when North Korea fell. Here's a 2011 Foreign Affairs article by maybe the world's top North Korea expert saying North Korea was doomed. and a big policy paper, 2013, on managing the fallout. North Korea kept staggering along, but every warning sign that was flagged in that CIA report was just getting worse and worse. That new leader, Kim Jong-il, died, passing power to his even more inexperienced son, Kim Jong-un, who had spent a bunch of his life in a Swiss boarding school under a fake name. And then things got really bad in 2020. The pandemic hit, North Korea shut off almost all outside trade, ordered troops to shoot any citizen who approached the border, and before long, reports were trickling out of food shortages and starvation. But North Korea obviously didn't collapse. Like, it just kept not collapsing. And then a few weeks ago, something very, very big happened. It's actually easier if I show you. Hold on. This is a secret North Korean document I got a hold of, although it's not something you would think would be secret. It's their new constitution. North Korea has only hinted at what's in this, but a couple weeks ago, snippets started showing up in the South Korean media. I got a copy from a former CIA person who'd gotten it from South Korean press, who probably got it from South Korean intelligence. But North Korea isn't disputing it because they probably want us to know about something big in here. It's right here on page 3. Article 2. It says, the territory of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea consists of the land, waters, and airspace bordering the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation to the north, and the Republic of Korea to the south. Remember, both the South and North Korean government's official position has always been this, that there's just one nation, one country, called Korea, even if it's temporarily divided between two governments. And this goal, this mission of reunifying Korea, it has defined North Korea since its formation, and including their old constitutions. This is an English translation of their last draft from 2019, before those secret changes. You can see right here, the old Article 9 pledged to reunify the country. Here it is again, reunification. But in this new constitution, completely deleted. In the old version too, the preamble set the reunification of the country as the supreme national task. Went on and on about reunification, and now that has all been deleted, like it was never there. And what replaced all this stuff that got cut? We'll go back to the new constitution, which has this whole new article, Article 2, the one saying that the country's territory is defined by having China and Russia to the north and the Republic of Korea to the south. They are declaring South Korea is now a separate country. They're saying this division between North and South, we are making it permanent. North Korea is declaring independence. This is North Korea declaring victory. Victory over its division from the South, over the forces that were supposed to have doomed it to collapse. Victory in that war they have been fighting for their survival since the 1990s, that everybody said they would lose. North Korea is saying, with this document, we have established ourselves, North Korea, for the first time, as its own country, as a fully realized, self-justifying, ideologically coherent state. We don't just exist anymore as a vestige of temporary division from the South. That division is permanent because North Korea is permanent. This was supposed to be impossible, but it looks like North Korea really did it. North Korea won. And today, we're going to figure out how they pulled it off. Hey folks, so I think we all know the challenge is not finding information anymore. It's figuring out what's missing from it. Like, that's something we've all experienced, right? And that's why we partnered with today's sponsor, Ground News. They're an app and website that gathers news from over 50,000 sources worldwide in one place. Let me show you how it works. Here's a great example. Trump announcing the US-Iran peace deal. Over 1,000 sources covered this story. I can see the bias breakdown, sort by factuality, and dive deeper into who owns the news sources that I'm reading. Here's the Associated Press, very high factuality, independent. They call it a tentative deal. But Forbes down here quotes Trump as calling the deal complete. It's an important distinction. I use Ground News because it surfaces perspectives you might not otherwise see. Like this. The Jewish Telegraphic Agency, not a source that's in my normal daily rotation, says Netanyahu is under fire in Israel over the US-Iran deal. It's useful information. So you can see why the Nobel Peace Center is even called Ground News, an excellent way to stay informed, avoid echo chambers, and expand your worldview. Right now, my viewers can get 40% off the unlimited access Vantage plan. Go to ground.news/Max Fisher or scan the QR code on screen here. Now, let's get back to the video. Okay, So we are going to use this board here to map out what I would call the 4 big things that were supposed to have doomed North Korea and how it beat them. We're going to start by mapping out each of those 4 threats facing North Korea, and then the scenario for collapse each threat could lead to, and then we'll come around to how North Korea solved each one. Okay, with me so far? Let's start with a very big threat to North Korea from the beginning: war with the United States. Remember, ever since 1945, Korea had been this frozen Cold War conflict between the Soviet-backed North and the US-backed South. But then, 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. North Korea was all alone after decades of threatening the US and its allies. They'd shot down a US Navy airplane, killing 31 people, captured 80 US sailors in neutral waters and tortured them for 11 months. They attacked South Korea a bunch. They spent years kidnapping Japanese civilians off of beaches in Japan. And now suddenly, they had no Soviet Union to protect them from a United States that was tired of this tiny, volatile rogue state attacking it and its allies, threatening war, building nukes. So it really seemed likely that sooner or later, some incident or another would spiral into an Iraq-style war with the US that would topple the regime. This has stayed a live threat to North Korea ever since, and we got really close a few times, including just a few years ago when Trump officials were saying this.
Are we preparing plans for a preventive war, right? A war that would prevent North Korea from threatening the United States with a nuclear weapon. And the president's been very clear about it.
On to threat number 2. North Korea's isolation from a world that sees it as a total pariah. And to symbolize that, I am pinning up the United Nations Security Council. That's what that is, the official body of the world powers, which has imposed over a dozen resolutions punishing North Korea over the years. And I'm pretty sure that's more than any other country has gotten. And my point here is not that North Korea is unpopular, although, boy, is it. It's that any country needs the rest of the world to survive. It needs trade, food for power, raw materials. It needs allies to secure its place in the world. But North Korea has so pissed off the entire planet that even China and Russia have supported sanctions cutting it off from global trade and banking. And it's actually even worse than that for North Korea, because China, its biggest and most important neighbor, plays this double game, where it also sends just enough aid and fuel across this one tiny little bridge linking the two countries to prevent North Korea from totally collapsing. Which sounds helpful, but creates a threat just as serious as an American invasion. This guy right here, Xi Jinping, all he has to do is turn off that aid, and it is literally lights out for North Korea, which is why some experts will tell you that North Korea's greatest fear is gradually becoming effectively a Chinese colony, being so at Xi Jinping's personal mercy that they are no longer truly an independent state, like kind of being conquered in a way. Okay, now on to threat number 3. And you can tell things are dire for North Korea that we are only now getting to the fact that this country is in a lot of ways sort of stuck in the dark ages. This is a satellite photo of North Korea and its neighbors at night. It's in darkness because this is one of the poorest countries in the world, to the point that big parts of it aren't even electrified, and where it is, they cannot keep the lights on. Now, I know there's an internet theory that photos like this one are manipulated, but if you look, you will see this same view showing this same thing taken by, say, other satellites like this one, or this map of light intensity from an independent study, or this taken with an astronaut's personal physical camera on the ISS. This is more than poverty. In the 90s, there was an economic downturn that led to 1 in 10 North Koreans starving to death. This is a country that is constantly teetering on the precipice of total economic collapse. And I know this is kind of a banal photo, right? It's just a kid in a field. There are more explicit photos, I guess I would say, of the famine in North Korea or of hunger, malnutrition there. I didn't want to use those, so just treat this as a placeholder. And when I say collapse, I mean the state could truly crumble away and not exist anymore. And I think they know it. This is, as far as I know, the only time a North Korean leader has admitted fault. The official translation quotes Kim as saying, "My efforts and sincerity have not been sufficient enough to rid our people of the difficulty in their life. I have failed to live up to our people's trust satisfactorily. I am really sorry for that." Because he knows, Kim Jong-un knows, if he doesn't fix this, he could lose his hold on power, or there might be nothing left to rule over. And speaking of Kim's hold on power, let's look at threat number 4 now. Political instability within the government. And I picked this photo because it shows Kim Jong-un taking power in 2011, flanked by the head of the military on one side and the de facto head of state on the other, two people who everyone was pretty sure were controlling Kim. So the threat is this. How is this silver spoon kid, educated abroad, outsider, untested, kind of isolated, supposed to hold his own within this hornet's nest of a militarized totalitarian dictatorship, and then somehow secure the regime's hold at a time when dictatorships worldwide are succumbing to popular uprisings, or fissuring from within, or falling into civil war? And do all this while the official basis of North Korea's existence, this mission to reunify Korea, is getting more and more empty and transparently absurd every year. So yeah, the scenario I am talking about is political instability. Uprising, regime collapse, whatever you want to call it. So these are the 4 big threats to North Korea's survival. And just to put this in context, most countries face 0 plausible scenarios for their imminent collapse. And if someplace has 1, it is a global geopolitical emergency. I mean, I can't think of any country that faced something like this and didn't collapse. Like maybe Afghanistan had this many, or the Democratic Republic of Congo, and yeah, both collapsed. So to have 4, like North Korea did for the last 30 years, and to survive it's impossible. So now we're going to look at how they did it. Starting with the US war threat. And North Korea's initial strategy for this was to try to strike a grand bargain with the Americans. And at first it looked like that might work. Check out this New York Times from October 1991, about a month before the Soviet Union collapsed. Down here. This story says the United States planned to withdraw its last nuclear weapons from South Korea as part of a trade with North Korea to get international inspections of its own nuclear installations. And a few weeks later, North Korea signed this, a joint declaration with South Korea pledging total denuclearization, an end to nuclear weapons work, just like the Americans wanted. And it went on like this for 2 years, like real positive steps on both sides towards completing this grand bargain where North Korea was going to give up its nuclear program, the US was going to back off militarily, and we were going to end up with real lasting peace between the two countries. This photo is a little misleading because it's actually from years later in 2009, but I just love it because look at how miserable Bill Clinton and Kim Jong-il look. And that's why they call it diplomacy. You can only make peace with your enemies, and that's why they call it making peace. Anyway, didn't work. Experts still argue over which side is more to blame, but the truth is that both of them dragged their feet on delivering their halves of the deal, which fueled mutual suspicion that the other side was conning them, didn't actually intend to follow through, which just led to more foot dragging and more distrust until the deal fell apart. So pretty soon, stuff like this started happening.
The nuclear device triggered just before 10 a.m. local time at a facility about 235 miles northeast of Pyongyang, registering as a 4.7 magnitude seismic event.
Now, at this point, the world made a big mistake because everyone assumed that North Korea's strategy was this: nuclear blackmail. Literally Dr. Evil from Austin Powers.
We get the warhead and we hold the world ransom for $1 million.
This was based on the belief that North Korea was a poor, backwards country, which is true, that would only ever be able to build a couple 1945-style clunker A-bombs that might not even work, that they would have no way to deploy more than a few miles from their own borders, and that would be mostly useless since setting them off would leave them defenseless to the inevitable counterattack, which would mean the nukes were only good for blackmailing the world for aid payments, which made the logical response imposing one round of economic sanctions after another, so that North Korea would conclude that their nuclear program was going to cost them more through sanctions than it would ever bring in through blackmail and abandon the program. But it turned out the world had this all wrong. This was not North Korea's plan. North Korea's actual plan was this: to turn itself into a real nuclear power that could stand toe-to-toe with the US. And you know what? They succeeded. First, in 2016, North Korea announced something no one thought was possible.
패고 2016년 1월 6일 10시 주체조선의 첫 수소탄 시험이 성공적으로 진행되었다.
Then they did it again in 2017.
North Korea launched its first ICBM on July 4th. That one flew for 40 minutes, long enough that it would have been able to hit Alaska.
And then this, a few months later.
Recent North Korean propaganda videos have featured the U.S. Capitol in flames. Analysts do believe that the missile launched today did have the range to hit Los Angeles, Chicago, or even New York.
North Korea was proving that it now had something called assured second strike. And what that means is that even if the U.S. attacked it first with everything it had, North Korea would have enough of these mobile ICBM launchers carrying nuclear warheads hidden around the country that it would be virtually guaranteed to get one off against a major U.S. city. And that, in strategic terms, is a checkmate. The U.S. cannot fight a war with North Korea without risking one of its own cities being incinerated by a North Korean nuke, which means it cannot fight a war with North Korea. So this, it's off the table. It is not happening. Which brings us to the other existential geopolitical threat, China, which, remember, North Korea relied on so utterly that it feared becoming a Chinese puppet. So how do you solve that? Well, with something big North Korea got from that shiny new nuclear program. Its first ever leader-to-leader meeting with a sitting U.S. president. Actually, a few. And they didn't produce much of substance.
Handsome, thin.
Beautiful. Young.
But this sent Xi Jinping a message. North Korea was becoming an accepted nuclear power with a direct relationship with the one country in the world even more powerful than China. And ironically, this is a strategy that Kim Jong-un learned from China. Back in the 50s and 60s, China had been a pariah itself, and it too feared being subsumed by its one powerful ally, in its case, the Soviet Union. But then it became a nuclear power. It used that to parley direct talks and détente with the United States, and it used that to play Washington and Moscow off of each other so that China, because it was being courted by both, would be subservient to neither. Finally, an independent power. And that is exactly what North Korea is now attempting to reproduce. So it looked at first like this might not be enough to break free of China, until this happened.
Russia has invaded Ukraine.
Russia's invasion goes really poorly. It's running low on troops and heavy munitions. It's increasingly isolated from the rest of the world. And this is North Korea's big moment. Finally, this impoverished little country that poured every penny into its military has something of value to trade. And finally, there's another country, Russia, globally ostracized enough to not mind the reputational hit of trading with them. So North Korea starts shipping thousands of soldiers, artillery shells, you name it, to Russia's front lines. And in exchange, among other things, they get this, a big public embrace from a major world power. And now China is scared, because it knows that Kim, between butting up to Putin and playing footsie with Trump, could actually break free from their orbit. So Xi Jinping and Putin start competing over who can be nicer to him to get him in their corner. Suddenly, North Korea is the geopolitical equivalent of the Bachelorette, and the world powers are all just suitors jockeying against one another to win that rose. Putin starts sending North Korea food and fuel and money in violation of his own sanctions on that country, so China, not to be outdone, sends fuel and food and money too. Putin has a big summit with Kim, so Xi has a big summit with Kim. Until you get this, Kim, this total pariah, hanging out with two world leaders at a state event in Beijing. And just like that, global pariah no longer. Which also sets up Kim to solve threat number 3, the risk of economic collapse. All those arms sales to Russia, the trade in goodies from Russia and China start to really add up. Until the Wall Street Journal calls North Korea the world's most surprising economic success story, thanks to, among other things, a single arms sale to Moscow generating more than $10 billion, a big boost to an economy worth just $27 billion. That is a crazy number. It would be like if the US booked a trade deal that brought in $11 trillion. Like that would transform daily life, right? And it turns out that's what's happening in North Korea. Visitors describe a North Korea unrecognizable from the past, restaurants with brick oven pizza, car dealerships selling BMWs, built 10,000 homes in Pyongyang, which is more than LA or Chicago. I mean, smartphones, new factories, a big new hospital, glass apartment towers with elevators that work. These are things I never thought we would see in North Korea. And it seems like it is all thanks to this. Kim playing Xi and Putin off each other so that they would compete to buy him off. So that economic collapse, it's just not a fear anymore. Okay, last one, political instability. And remember, this was the main one that the CIA report warned was going to lead to North Korea's collapse. Because on top of all the usual risks of coups and infighting and unrest you get in a brittle, aging dictatorship, North Korea justified its entire existence on a promise to unify Korea under its leadership that it could never bring about and never give up, because doing either would end the North Korean state. So Kim did a few things here, starting with this. This is Jang Sang-taek, Kim's own uncle. This guy here was considered even more powerful than the two people flanking Kim in this photo from when he took office. He was considered even more powerful than Kim. And what it shows is Jang being dragged away to be executed. And it doesn't matter what his supposed crime was. Kim had his uncle and a bunch of other powerful officials killed to show that he was in charge, that the ruling elite were not going to run him, and that they better get in line. But fear only gets you so far in holding up a dictatorship. It's really just a short-term stopgap, which is why it was so important that Kim got Russia and China to fight over who could bail out his economy harder so that he could deliver this, an unprecedented economic boom. As best anyone can tell, all this wealth, the high-rises and smartphones and cars, is all being funneled into the capital. Most of the country is probably still in deep poverty, but it's the capital that matters when it comes to political stability. That's why Putin has spent billions making Moscow nicer and nicer, even as the rest of Russia sinks deeper and deeper into poverty. This is a time-tested authoritarian trick. Prosperity in the capital means the military and political elite, instead of posing a threat to Kim, instead of being rivals, are all invested in protecting him and holding him up. And everyone down to the poorest street sweeper is better off, so probably there's never going to be a mob here that storms the presidential palace. And Kim has done some other big stuff as part of this. Like he shut down the black markets that North Korea relied on for years to bring in food because he's getting enough food now from Russia and China, which strengthens him politically because he controls who eats, and because the black markets had been bringing in foreign TV shows and movies that undermine his control of information and ideology. And then, kind of in recognition of that, 2024, Kim announced reunification was no longer possible. It closed the government agencies dedicated to it. But it wasn't until now with, remember this new constitution, that Kim has made it fully official. Not just that North Korea is done with unification, but that it now believes it can make the case for its existence as its own permanent and independent state, both to the rest of the world and internally. This is saying, we solved it. It's saying this is over. And you take a step back. You take this in, you can kind of see their case, right? Global recognition, toe-to-toe with great powers and growing economy. And I'm not the only one who's noticed this. Here's the New York Times, a miraculous transformation. Foreign affairs, how North Korea won. And this is its own victory, the fact that no one is predicting collapse anymore. Because if the world thinks North Korea is here to stay, they will treat it that way, as a fact of life to accept and figure out how to deal with, instead of a historical mistake to just wait out. But is that right? Is North Korea here to stay? Look, if there's one law of nature about authoritarian governments, it's that, as a rule, they just don't survive very long. The average lifespan of a modern dictatorship is about 10 to 12 years. Even the Soviet Union, one of the most enduring dictatorships of the modern era, survived 69 years. And North Korea's political system has been around now for 76 years. That's 7 more than the Soviet Union ever made it. That's 1 more than China's. Now, I'm pretty sure there is not another authoritarian state currently standing that had been around this long. It survived 2 transfers of power, which is usually when these systems collapse, and Kim is already grooming his daughter for transfer of power number 3. Now, either that means North Korea is overdue, and every year that passes is borrowed time before the inevitable, or it means that North Korea has just cracked some code no other autocracy has. I don't know which is true. Neither clearly does the CIA, and probably even Kim Jong-un doesn't know. His North Korea, this model he's pursuing, it's just too new to say one way or the other. It's a data set of one, a case study of a few years. But, I will say this, what he has done so far should have been impossible. This is impossible. So for the moment, at least, North Korea really has won.